think if you invite them in the process, allow them to utilize their own faculties to experience it and to deal with it and to grieve it just like you are, and to have that communication between you and the child or children, you're going to be so far ahead setting them up for success. So anyway, today I thought we would talk about parenting through divorce. You know, it's something that we talk about a lot. We talk about divorce, we talk about parenting, and I think sometimes, a lot of times, what maybe falls through the cracks is how the kid's dealing with it.
Right. We're by no means experts, but we did learn by going
I feel like an
through
expert.
it. Well, you think you're an expert on everything, so there's that. But,
Beep.
I mean, there are definitely some things that I would do different. You know, like they say, hindsight's 20/20. You learn through experience. You just kind of do the best you can in the moment. But then looking back, there were definitely some areas that I could have improved on to kind of help my kids through that process.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we all can. You know, I mean, I don't claim to speak for everybody, but you know, when you even consider obviously, if you're the person that it's sprung on divorce, then you just have to react, right?
Right.
Like
yeah.
you did.
Total react. I mean, looking back now, I wish I would have read some things and thought more. I was just like in survival mode and trying to like hide all I was going through for my kids, thinking that would hurt them more.
Right. You know, and I think and people with a situation like yours where you're I don't know what the right word is, but you don't have the choice. You have to react. Somebody else made the decision. You have to react. That's one thing. But I think for a lot of people out there, that's one of the, it's one of the, if not the top reason for people who hesitate, right? You think about, do I want to get divorced? A lot of us have been through it and are like, yeah, this relationship isn't good for me. I want out, need out. But if there's children involved, then that's a game changer then, because, and again, I don't mean to speak for everybody, and everybody's situation is different, but we always worry about the impact, obviously, and rightfully so. I guess we should.
Right.
We should.
Yeah, that's the first place my mind went to were the kids, and even at any age, you know, mine were older. Mine were 20 and 22. They were still in the home, so we still very much felt like, you know, that tight family unit. But there was a whole other dynamic by them being older. And I initially felt like, or thought, you know, you think you know, rather than asking them, I thought, well, this is probably a little easier since they're older. In which years later, I had a discussion. I almost feel like we're just now able to open up and kind of talk about it. And I said that to my daughter, you know, well, you know, I'm glad you all weren't young, you know, when you all went through this. And she said, well, sometimes for a child that's younger, it's kind of all they know, all they remember. And so for her, she kind of opened my eyes to think it was just as hard on them going through that as young adults as it was if they were small children. You know, I made the comment, well, at least you didn't have to get shuffled back and forth between parents, you know, like custody, because you all were adults and didn't have to do that. And she said, well, you know, if that's kind of all they know, that's their norm. But from their perspective, they were older. They kind of knew the way it unfolded, and they were hearing what was going on through their friends, unfortunately, because it was a small community, which it happened within. They had to deal with that aspect of it. So it wasn't as easy or less easy because of their age, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and I found personally that was a deep, dark hole to fall into. Was trying to decide, well,
when's a good time?
Right, when's a good time
to pull the trigger if you're the one that winning out.
Right, because 10 years into my marriage, I knew for a long time that wasn't the right relationship. But life happens, and woke up 10 years later, and I'm like, I walked up to to the edge metaphorically and wanted to exit. Kids were a lot younger then. It was going through my mind that I didn't want them to be, like you just said, shuffle back and forth. I wanted to be an absent dad and this and that, and there's a lot of guilt beating yourself up. So I rationalized it away and, ignored it. Well, 10 years
Another
10
10 years goes by.
10, 12 years later rolls by, and now it's almost like when you eat something that doesn't agree with your stomach, right? It's coming back up and only worse now, and you've got to deal with it. So you start rationalizing. And my point is that we spend all this time and energy in trying to figure out what's the best way to handle it. Do I wait do I do it when they're younger? Do I wait till they're older? Blah, 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 blah. And honestly, it doesn't, we make it harder than we need to make it.
Well, it's always going to hurt kids,
That's right.
no matter what age, I think is our point. Yours were a little bit younger, not super young, and mine were older, and it was still a huge impact. And I think where a lot of fault or a lot of guilt that I feel about the whole process is that I didn't really sit down and communicate with my children because I was afraid of losing it and them seeing the emotion behind it hurting them more. When in reality, looking back, I wish that was something I would have changed. I wish I would have sat down and spoke about it, opened that door for them to let their feelings out and how they were feeling. But that's kind of my personality, is I'm a stuffer, and I think I'm shielding other people by shielding and hiding my emotions when they're uncomfortable or sad.
Yep, I'm the same way. What makes us think as parents that we're doing our kids justice or serving them correctly by withholding things from them and keeping it a distance and pretending like everything's fine, and when they ask questions to dismiss them or to redirect or whatever.
Well, and then when we they mirror us, so then they learn how to deal with conflict, and I feel like I've passed that on to my children about holding things in.
And that's the key, right? So I think I've said this before, but I heard somebody say a long time ago with kids that more is caught than taught. Kids pick up intuitively. We all do. Pick up intuitively through body language and inflection and all those nonverbal cues, what's really going on.
And there is sometimes, sorry.
No, I was going to say, but we think because we take the conversation out of the room and we don't include
that we're
them
sheltering them.
And that they don't really know what's going on, and we're protecting them and blah, blah, blah. We're sheltering them when actually, and I don't have this data to prove this, but I would wager that we do.
You want me to take over what here? Well,
we do way more harm than we do good.
You don't show them reality, so you leave it up to the imagination. Just as adults, how we sometimes let our mind run wild. If you're not open and honest with them, they're creating this whole picture in their head. Like, am I losing a parent? What's my life going to look like? What, and they can create something far worse than what the reality is of it all. So I think it's so important to sit down and talk to them, which there is a balance, though. There's a fine line depending on their age, how much you should share, because you definitely don't want them to take on more than they can handle as well.
No, I agree. You can't just throw them in the middle of it. There's certain
there's things you're not going to say to a 6-year-old that you would say to your 16-year-old.
Right. There's certainly things that are age appropriate. I agree with that. But, and I'm going to get into this as one of the points that I'm, in retrospect and having walked through it, something that I'm, a few things that I'm adamant about. But, what are you doing?
My earring was falling out. I was trying to fix it. Are they good? I felt
good.
it falling out.
They're good.
Made you lose your train of thought?
No,
I'm sorry.
A lot of people, not everybody, go through like marriage counseling, premarital counseling. I say, some people sit down and they talk with an elder or somebody that talks about marriage. They never talk about this. No one ever talks about at the beginning, when you're in a beginning relationship and you think this is going to really grow into something long term, like a marriage, that says, and I think this would be so good to have a course or teach us, say, this could happen in a relationship if you and walk through it. If you have kids, talk about how you handle it, because you never know how to handle it. No one ever tells you how to handle it. You just have to figure it out when you get there.
And you're under so much stress, and you're in fight or flight mode, not mold, mode. And, if you had kind of already had that little tidbit of information, it would be so helpful, because you can't sometimes think clearly when you're in that kind of situation and so much is changing. And
well, you can't. And then most of the time the input you're getting from other people, family or friends, isn't helpful. It's biased, or it's one-sided, or it's they're projecting their opinions.
Right.
Occasionally you do. But I guess the point is, it's never a good time to figure out what's best to do when you're in the middle of it, because you're never going to have good information. You're never going to be in a good state of mind to make the right decisions.
Yeah, looking back, I wish I would have gotten to some kind of counseling myself to kind of help with navigating with the children, instead of just kind of ignoring it and pushing it under the rug. I feel like my daughter kind of took on the parent role because of that, the way I reacted and kind of turned inward. And that's nothing, a kid should not have to do that in this situation.
No.
I mean, they're dealing with so much. She didn't have the chance in the moment to deal with what she was going through and her pain, because she was so focused on me and taking care of me.
Right. Yeah, and you can get an empathetic or sensitive child who that's the role they take, right? And you have other children who are wired differently, and they disconnect, or they fragment, or there's as many children as there are, there's different ways that they handle it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's so complex. So I think the best way to handle it is to have a plan. And that almost sounds like bad, because they say, fail to plan, plan to fail. But the reality is, if you're entering into a relationship with somebody else long term, you should be thinking about these things.
Well, you think about it because you've done disaster planning. That's the way your mind thinks. Yeah. But, most people, especially in my situation that didn't see it coming, you just don't plan for that.
Agreed. So this is exactly why we're sitting here talking, right? And we're sharing our experiences, and we're sharing our thoughts based on our experiences that might help other people who any stage. They're either thinking about getting into a marriage, or they're in it, or they're not happy, or they're very happy but they have kids but they're concerned. It doesn't matter. It's never too early to plan. And some people think, well, it's morbid to think about, or not, maybe not morbid, but it's horrible to think about. But it's being practical. I think it's being responsible. I wished I'd had somebody in my life that had been a mentor, that kind of taken me through some of these thoughts and ideas as I was progressing and getting, into a mature adult relationship with the thought of having children.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
Well, and I mean, my advice would be, if you are caught in this situation, you find yourself in this situation, reach out to an outside party that can kind of help you navigate this, because it's hard to figure it out all on your own. Mm-hmm. In a different perspective. Looking inward, someone that's been through it, even if it's just a friend, can really be insightful.
Yeah, the old the value of perspective is distance. Right? The farther away you can step away from something, the better your perspective, and you never have good perspective when you're right in the middle of it dealing with it. So we talked generalities right now. We talked about the fact that you're dealing with kids, you're dealing with their emotions, you're dealing with them. Obviously, as good parents, we want to really do our best to help them navigate through a tragedy. It's a tragedy. It's not only is it a tragedy, but it ends up most times becoming trauma.
Yeah.
To some level or another, depending on the child.
Even I know I keep saying, but mine were young adults, but even older adults, it's devastating when your parents get divorced. Mm-hmm. I mean, your world as you knew it is shattered.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think that doing what I did, like not going, what I'm trying to say here, I don't think that putting your own feelings and desires away is the right thing to do it. In other words, I don't want to put my kids through this, so I'm just going to be the soldier at the gate, and I'm just going to muscle through it, head down. You got to take care of yourself first. Right? If you're not happy, and I had a counselor say this one time, and I'll paraphrase it. He said, your kids are looking at you as a parent or as a dad, specifically, as something real and hard to bump up against. Like they need they need to have you being solid and sound. That word integrity, soundness inside and out. They need that, and they're gonna test that and feel that all the time. They need you to be sound, and when you're not, then they're untethered, right? So you've got to take care of yourself first and be in a place where you're solid and happy, and then no matter what's going on, that you're that kind of rock and anchor for them.
Yeah.
Again, this is all hindsight for me,
Right.
And you, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I would tell people who are in this situation or touching in any way is vulnerability and transparency is the key. And you've got to let your kids know what you're feeling. You can't shield them from that. And you've got to be able to help them express their feelings in words, and not try to condition it. We always do that. Why we condition our own feelings or we can try to condition theirs. Just let them, give them the space and environment to express whatever they need to express going through this.
So important. See, I held mine in thinking I was protecting them, which in turn they held their feelings in to protect me. Mm-hmm. So no one was talking. Yeah,
well, in your case, your kids knew your makeup. They knew you were sensitive. You knew you were empathetic. They knew that you're a feeler. So they're not going to act in a way that's going to draw that out of you right?
Right. But that's the thing. That's not so bad. That's what needs to happen.
Well, exactly. Right.
The tough conversation.
Right, and so it becomes this ping pong tournament of you act a certain way and you're not being completely honest, and then they're acting a certain way, and then it goes like this, and everyone's always on a defensive posture. Everyone's always trying to shift and make a move for the other person instead of just saying, this is messy and it sucks and it hurts, and I don't have any control, or I say control, but it's okay to feel out of control.
Right. It's okay to have good days. It's okay to have bad days, and talk about it and let them know that their feelings and what they're going through is normal, so that they don't feel like they have to hide it and stuff it. I had one child that, I offered counseling to both of them, and one took me up on it and went and saw someone, and it wasn't a good fit. They were like, "Oh, you're fine," basically, because she was very open, and I wish I would have created that door for her to speak to me like that. But he basically was like, "You're fine." And she's like, "I'm not going back. It's a waste of time." She wanted some tools. She wanted some strategy to help navigate it. And he was just there to listen, which is good. But, she needed more from him. And I just wish that I could have maybe been the sounding board for her. And then my son was like, "Nope, I think he's just like me. Compartmentalize, truck on through." There was no way he was going to talk to a counselor. And it never even dawned on me. I needed to see a counselor too, but I was so focused on my kids.
Yeah.
And their emotional well-being over mine.
Isn't it funny how culturally we're so conditioned on our feelings, what we feel comfortable express, and what we feel comfortable allowing others to express. For example, nobody ever chides you or says anything when you're laughing. Every laugh is a great emotion.
I know, but what about the crying, and why is that so embarrassing? I'm super emotional, and I hate that I have no control over that.
Great.
And I try to hide it from people. It's like it's a weakness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and crying is dubbed as bad. You kids cry, you try to shut it down. The parents cry, they're always trying to comfort. Whatever. There's always a lot of times this negative response to it. It's it's just as much of an emotion as laughing.
Yeah, and you want to create that safe space in your home for your kids to allow them to have all those emotions.
Yeah, it's the body's physiological response to feelings and emotions. It has to come out, right? Physiologically, there's health benefits to the body for laughing. There's health benefits to crying. There's health benefits to yawning. So we condition these. And so if you can realize that we all have these emotions, we, one, need to let our kids experience them all. And two, we need to let ourselves be vulnerable to experience them in front of them.
Well, and let's be clear, too. We're not talking about, you definitely don't want to be bad-mouthing the other parent to the child because,
But that's not what we're talking about.
No, I know, but I'm just clarifying for anybody that's listening or watching. that's the worst thing you could do. No matter what happened on either side, that's still their parent. You know, it's almost like one of those things you could say something to your kids, but if anybody else did, like, you're fighting to the death for your kid. You know, that they love their kids, love their parents. And so you definitely don't want to do that. You just want to be open and express the situation you're going through and how you're feeling. So we're not saying it's a free for all, bash the spouse, you know, to your kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about being open. I wish I was more open with my feelings and emotions and what I was going through, the uncertainty, and allow them to share that with me.
Mm-hmm. So I'll say I remember it's maybe hard to talk about.
Oh gosh.
So my daughter was, I think, 16 going on 17, and my son was 13 going on 14, right around their birthday. Anyway, it was about that time. And I remember having a conversation with my daughter. So my daughter and my son were completely different. Obviously, they're wired different. But having the conversation with my daughter was more transactional, maybe because she's like your son. She's compartmentalizes a lot, which isn't a bad thing. It wasn't as difficult for me talking to her about it as it was talking to my son. I remember sitting out in the backyard, and he was sitting on a bale of hay, and I was sitting on a bale of hay. And
You're going to make me cry.
and I think that experiencing his reaction, his questions, it made me go into like protection mode, you know, and where I didn't really want to be completely vulnerable. But, you know, it's interesting because, like, we had, so I was still in the house, but we weren't sleeping in the same bedroom. I had moved upstairs and been for a while, and my son knew what was going on, but I was making excuses. Oh, you know, this reason or that reason. But we had a conversation a long time ago. Later, it was like, he knew what was going on. It was a big aha for me. It was like, kids know what's going on, no matter how you try to lie to them, even if it's, you know,
I had that same
good,
aha moment.
You're trying
with
to protect
my son,
them. Yeah.
Which it wasn't directly through him, but his girlfriend later on told me, who's his now wife, that he had made a comment once, I wouldn't be surprised if my parents got divorced, which was a big shock to me because I thought, you know.
You didn't even know.
Yeah, I didn't even know. I mean, you know, we didn't really argue. We didn't argue in front of them, and, you know, but he felt the energy and the level of respect that we had for one another. And so, you know, it was shocking to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think what we've talked about, there's kind of 4 main points, right, is make sure communication is key. Even if you don't feel like you have all your thoughts together, you need to be communicating. I mean, ideally, if you could communicate as a couple, as a parents, while you're going through this, that's the ideal. And I know some people that have amicably separated or amicably divorced and were able to take their kids through it and treated it like it was really good and adultish.
Yeah.
And those kids were, I mean, it's still difficult and trauma, but those kids were set up the best for success. Ideally, is you go through it together. Reality is most times it's not that way. So if you're that person who's rational, if you're the person who's thinking about how to best manage and set your kids up for success, then it's be communicative, be open, freely talk about your emotions and feelings, be raw. It's okay, right? Because like you said earlier, you're teaching them how to express their emotions as they get older. You're teaching them good behavioral patterns, and that's really important.
Absolutely.
Secondly, you encourage them to talk about their feelings. Give them that freedom, that space. You can be the facilitator in that, even if it's just
so that you
taking a walk, getting away.
Heal together.
That's right.
Throughout
That's right.
the journey. Like I said, I feel bad. I feel like my daughter's healing journey started later because she was so focused on taking care of me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So by helping them work through their feelings and talk about them, you're teaching them really solid life skills, not just for relationship, but work, whatever. So that's a really strong skill. The other thing is, like you said, don't allow your children to take an adult role. Don't become the victim. Don't become this passive state where you're it's good sometimes when you're in a bad place to feel like you're valued, like somebody cares about you. We do these weird things from a psyche perspective when we get in a bad place. But I mean, if I tell anybody, if you are behaving or seeing behavioral patterns in a way that are causing your children to act in an adult role to try to take care of their parents because they try to.
I mean, and
you got to see it for what it is.
Mine was the lack of communication. She just assumed that's what she needed to do, whereas I wish I would have spoke up and said, "I'm okay," and let's talk about how you're feeling right now. Bounce back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will say that, adult conversations between the adults while they're happening shouldn't happen in front of the children.
Oh,
they're not
totally
for
agree.
children's ears. Not to say that you shouldn't come back and you can give them an update.
Or have like a family meeting where they can ask
meetings.
you questions,
Right.
the parents.
You definitely want to shield
really
them
wanted that,
from
and that
those.
never happened.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to. But you definitely need to shield them from those because a lot of times there's information sharing that they don't need to process. They don't have the capacity to process. So why put it on them? You said deal with put yourself in their shoes, get behind their eyes, see, hey, what are they dealing with? How are they feeling? Deal with that. And never let them be kids. Let them deal with it at their level. Don't allow them to try to step into an adult role. And we say that by taking care of the parent.
Right.
Being empathetic, that's one thing. Loving is another thing. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about stepping into the wrong roles. And I think the last one for me is it's not. You said it. It's don't badmouth. Don't speak badly. Don't bash the other parent in front of your kids.
Right.
Because I cannot tell you the host of bad things and patterns, behaviors you're teaching them by doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the worst things you could do to your children.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let out your anger and frustration. Don't put that on their shoulders. They're already carrying enough.
Right. I mean, let's face it. Things can get pretty ugly in a divorce between two people. They do. We're all dealing with our emotions. We say things we don't mean, whatever. That's okay. That has to come out. Creating a time and a place for that. I remember in my marriage towards the very end where, shit just blew up in the house. It got ugly. And, there was, it was just bad. Both my kids were upstairs. We were downstairs. They heard every bit of it. That still weighs in my heart today because, we should have taken it somewhere else. That conversation needed to happen. It happened with a lot of, let's say, energy. But it didn't need to happen there. And that's something they really struggled with for a long time. It wasn't what was said. It was the fact that they were watching their parents just kind of go at it, and it crushed them. So you really be cognizant of that at a time and place. If you're going to have those, either have somebody watch the kids, send them somewhere, or go somewhere. It's typically hard to go somewhere when you need to be in your home. Send the kids somewhere. Have a friend or a parent or a relative come pick them up, stay overnight, whatever.
Yeah. Our separations were so vastly different. It's just interesting. Here you had this big explosion. I just had crickets. Had to investigate and hear all the rumors come through about what the heck was going on and drag it out, and which made me insane. But
we
all do the best we can in those situations,
Yeah. So I don't know, what your parting word is, but I would say my parting word for everybody is everything we've talked about. I think the key is, even if you have to do it by yourself, again, speaking where the other parent may not be in agreement with you, may want to do their own thing, that's fine. You have to be responsible for yourself. My thing would be, if you have children, you're going through a divorce, or you're looking at divorce, invite them into the process, to walk the process with you. It sounds irresponsible. It sounds dangerous. It sounds like there's a lot of things when you think about opening my kids up to some of this is I just want to protect them because I'm a parent. I think if you invite them in the process, allow them to utilize their own faculties to experience it and to deal with it and to grieve it just like you are, and to have that communication between you and the child or children, you're going to be so far ahead setting them up for success. Will there be issues? Probably, but that's okay. But I'm telling you, you really minimize them. And not only that, but you set them up with so many good life skills, behavioral skills to be successful in all areas of their life as they're older, that looking back, you and I can see that now.
Yeah. You wrapped that up beautifully, Mr. Sargent. I don't think there's anything I can add.
Yeah. You're a good mom.
You're a good dad.
I love you.
I love you too.